So it was requested that Royal Arch put on a bit of a presentation, really to make people aware partially of what it is. We've all heard of it. And so I agreed. I actually wrote this preamble some time ago when it was thought pre-COVID that various concordant bodies would make presentations in craft lodges to let folks know. Well, that's passed. But today we are going to do a bit of a presentation. There was meant to be at least one other participant. But so, brethren, as I expect you're all aware, the Masonic journey continues beyond the 3 degrees of craft lodge. Having been raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason, an individual is considered by his peers to be a fully formed, ancient, free and accepted Mason. Any further progression through the chairs or toward Grand Lodge is optional. However, the 3 degrees of craft lodge may also be viewed as a foundation upon which successive layers of Masonic knowledge and experience can be raised. The 3 concordant bodies represented in the East Kootenay are Royal Arch Masonry, often referred to as Red Lodge, Cryptic Rite, and Preceptory. The first body that an individual progressing beyond craft lodge would encounter is Royal Arch Masonry. It comprises 3 degrees: Mark Master Mason, Most Excellent Master, and Holy Royal Arch. The first of these, the Mark Master Mason, was once only given to those who had served as master in a craft lodge, and in some jurisdictions is still part of craft lodge masonry. The setting is the Temple Mount during the later stages of building King Solomon's Temple, and the moral play touches on brotherhood and the often overlooked qualities inherent within each of us. The Most Excellent Master's degree work is set during the completion and dedication of King Solomon's Temple and builds on the analogy of temple and man, strong foundations and being raised on the principles of the square, level, and plumb rule. The Royal Arch degree work follows the travails of 3 sojourners as they seek to gain employment on the rebuilding of the temple and the discoveries they make in the process. The setting is 470 years after the completion of King Solomon's Temple, when a start is being made on its reconstruction. This afternoon, it was to have been 2 companions of Rocky Mountain chapter, Greg Constable and the sorely missed Don Taggart, shall give short lectures representative of characters that play parts in the dramas of each degree. It is interesting to note that the degree work of all of the aforementioned concordant bodies is intimately connected with Palestine and the building of Solomon's Temple through to the era following the Crusades. Greg, I hand it over.
Okay, you'll notice I'm not wearing regalia. That's because in this jurisdiction, Mark Master Mason is not a separate lodge. It's part of the Royal Arch Lodge. In England, it is a separate lodge. So if you look up Mark Master Mason regalia, you'll see it's dark blue and red. And that's how it comes up. It's a completely separate lodge. It's supposedly the 4th degree in Masonry. And I should also let you know that the degrees don't go evenly like this. You will interweave all the way around. So some of the degrees in Royal Arch occur between fellow craft and Master Mason. Some degrees in Cryptic occur before the Mark Master Mason degree, which is the first one in the Royal Arch. And the Mark Master Mason degree is involved of a whole pile of people working, some in the quarries, Some of them are workers on the temple trying to prove their work and construct it. And I'm the master overseer. So I check. Oh, yeah. Okay, we're good. We're good. Yep, we're good. Check to see that all the materials here work out. To better control the work, I'm reading now, King Solomon selected certain fellow crafts who were well skilled in their work, as well as master masons working on the temple, and advanced them to the degree of Mark Master Mason. What does Mark Master Mason mean? It means you have a peculiar mark that's only yours, that you can indent, write, mark, carve on the various materials. So if I say, hey, who did this? Oh, there's my mark. We know right away who did it. I'm one of these master masons. I was assigned duties of master overseer. My job was to inspect, accept, or reject the work of all marked masters. So I would sit at my station daily and they would bring by all their stuff to me and I'd try it and prove it. But what a couple of weeks we just went through. First of all, this is part of the marked degree. There was quite a bit of an excitement when somebody tried to obtain wages which he was not entitled to, through ignorance, of course, but still. Then there was a lost piece of work that was heaped amongst the rubbish, threatened to delay all the work on the temple. Finally, there was a wage dispute among the workmen. But, as always, King Solomon the Wise solved all the problems and in the process taught the craft valuable lessons, values being honest employment and charity. Those fellow crafts, as well as we master masons, won't forget what happened for a long, long time. Well, I'm going to turn this over to you while I get changed into my next thing. The next degree Andrew is going to speak of is one you need in this jurisdiction, but in some areas where you cannot join the Mark Master Mason's Lodge unless you sat in the chair, and when you were sitting in the chair, you held that for life. There was another degree called Virtual Past Master, and Andrew, I'll be about 3 minutes, so, okay.
We are in for a treat in that Greg is going to get into a peculiar piece of garb that is rarely used in degree work now, mainly because nobody can fit into it, but we will see that. But so a past master, as Greg says, we don't use it in this jurisdiction. It's an old one, but it does tie into the whole tale of Royal Arch Masonry. It would have been agreed that it was adopted. So this is a piece that's put together for him. And good afternoon, brothers. In the degree of past master, we leave the time of King Solomon and return to the present day world. In the 18th century, when speculative masonry was being developed, the degree of Royal Arch Mason was controlled by the symbolic lodges. Only past masters could receive this degree. The thinking at that time was that the Royal Arch degree was so sublime and so important that only those well skilled in speculative masonry could understand its lessons. Sorry, I had trouble with reading. You take your eyes from the page, you sort of lose it. Could understand its lessons and fully appreciate them. Obviously, this greatly limited the number of brothers who could receive the valuable lessons of the Royal Arch, especially when Royal Arch chapters were formed independently of the Blue Lodges. In England and in most of Canada, the past master requirement was dropped. However, in Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and in the United States, they confer the degree of virtual past master. This maintains tradition while allowing all master masons the opportunity to continue on to the Royal Arch. Obviously, this degree confers no honors or privileges outside of the chapter and should in no way confuse virtual past masters with actual past masters. Those who served as worshipful masters or of symbolic lodges, the lessons imparted in this degree deal with the responsibilities of those who would lead their brothers. Well, I see that Greg's ready to go, so I was going to add to that a little bit, but we won't. I hand it over to
Pause. Thank you. Okay, so we're now back to our jurisdiction in the second of 3 degrees in Red Lodge. It's called the Most Excellent Master, but this degree also does not take place across everywhere. We've had a couple of Grand Masters say that, hey, we'll watch Don Barr do the Most Excellent Master degree here because we don't have it in our jurisdiction. This is equivalent to the Fellowcraft degree in length in Royal Arch. It's a very, very short degree, and I'm going to tell you about it and read a little bit. It involves a lot of playing by the musician, which I have the pleasure of doing, and you're not going to get to hear unless you submit application to Red Lodge. But anyway, Most Excellent Master. Good afternoon, brothers. We are now back to the time of King Solomon. After the Mark Master Masons tried to obtain wages incorrectly and created some work that got thrown amongst the rubbish, we are now going to dedicate the temple. I'm the high priest of the Jewish people. I'm dressed in my ceremonial robes with the tassel that I did not step on, thank you, Scott, because in this degree of Most Excellent Master, I am to preside over the completion and dedication of King Solomon's temple. It's done. Yes, we finally completed it, and it is absolutely magnificent. The last stone of the temple is to be cemented in its place. The aprons of the workmen will be taken off and laid aside. That's a very significant part of the degree, where the aprons are laid beside the I can't say too much, but beside the final piece of construction. And the holy vessels of the temple finally will be carried into the Sanctum Sanctorum. You hear an awful lot about that in Craft Lodge, but you never actually see it until this degree. Then the temple will be dedicated. I dare say that Jerusalem has never seen anything so ceremonial or splendid as what we've planned. It was carried in tents for a long time. It is now in a temple. The Sanctum Sanctorum, the holiest of holiest. After more than 7 years of construction, the labors of the craftsmen are completed, and the Most Excellent Master degree will be their reward. And finally, I'll be able to walk from my quarters to the temple without having to detour around construction barriers. This degree here is a very, very interesting degree. Again, it occurs interwoven with the Craft Lodge degrees. So, would you like to wear this, or are you going to go ahead?
No, if you will excuse me.
Okay. Oh, well, I'd be happy to let you wear this awesome.
And it's interesting to note, and Greg may tell you about it, that we just performed this degree in Invermere at our last gathering.
Yeah, while he's getting changed into the regalia that they actually wear in Red Lodge or Royal Arch, I'll tell you a little bit about it. Chapter or Red Lodge or Royal Arch, there used to be one in Fernie, one in Cranbrook, one in Caslow, one in, I believe, Grand Forks, and Rossland, and Nelson. All of these are now amalgamated into one that meets in Invermere. The West Kootenay guys join us from Castlegar, and we have a couple of candidates from Nelson as well that are coming across, or sorry, Will Trowell's not from Nelson, a couple of other West Kootenay candidates coming across, and they make a weekend of it. So they come on Friday night for 2 other York Rite concordant bodies, if they've been that far, and then Royal Arch on the Saturday. And it's actually turned into a very, very nice weekend 4 times a year. Yes?
Has there been any discussion about holding those meetings alternately in the East and West, or would that require too much movement?
A lot of movement of regalia and stuff. We'd thought about it, you know, we'd thought about that in the past, but it was just too difficult to do for the degree that Andrew's going to be talking about here. The amount of stuff. I mean, you'd need pickup trucks for all the props and stuff. So
Jerry Whitlock's a new thing. Remember, he has a truck.
Okay. Principal Sojourner.
I've got it here.
Okay, this is now the 3rd or major or longest degree of the Royal Arch chapter. Over to you.
And what I am wearing, sadly, I couldn't. That doesn't fit me anymore, so I wasn't able to dress in anything quite so grand. But this is the apron and sash of a Royal Arch Mason. So this is what's generally worn at all the meetings. It replaces the Craft Lodge apron. So once again, playing a part here. So the sojourners within the Royal Arch degree, 3 of the secondary Officers are the sojourners. You have a principal, senior, and junior. So, brothers, it is 470 years since King Solomon's temple was completed and dedicated. But the temple stands no more because disobedience to God's commands, the enemies of the Jewish nation were loosed upon them. Jerusalem was captured, the holy vessels were taken from the temple, and the temple destroyed. And the Jewish people were made captive and forcibly taken to Babylon. When the Persians conquered Babylon, the Jewish captives were released and allowed to return to their homeland to rebuild the city and the house of the Lord. In the Royal Arch degree, the candidates represent sojourners who, under my guidance as principal sojourner, made the hazardous journey from Babylon to Jerusalem, and then volunteered their services to assist in the rebuilding of the temple on the site of the original Temple of Solomon. During their labors, valuable discoveries are made, culminating in the recovery of the lost master's word. Now, without giving too much away, and I did discuss this with a couple of other folks, there is a point in that ceremony. It's a long, very involved degree, which, like most degrees, the candidate at the time really doesn't grasp what's going on because there's just too much going on. But part of it involves, while they're clearing rubble and getting ready to rebuild, preparing the site to rebuild the temple, lo and behold, a rock comes out, and there is discovered this chamber. And much goes on from there. There are things hidden in that chamber that Babylonians hadn't known about, but it was never found. So there's great things there. So this is the point where I digress a bit, because I don't know if any of you, I think most people know where Orkney is. An island, it's a group of islands to the north of Scotland. And it's been populated by a lot of people, for a long time, since, going back almost 6,000 years. And there are many fascinating archaeological sites there. And one of them is a mound, it's a hill called Maze Howe. And it was always left alone. It was like a hill of the fairies and the spirits, and people left it alone. Until about 1,500 years ago, the Vikings showed up. And they weren't having any of this nonsense about fairies and spirits and leave the hill alone. Being typical Vikings, well, if it's that special, there must be something in there. So, and this all comes together. So, of course, they went to the top of it. They tried to find a way in, but they couldn't. So they went to the top and started digging a hole, and sure enough, here was this chamber in there. They let themselves in, and I've been inside that chamber. And inside, there is ancient graffiti hewn into the stone in Nordic runes. And the typical part of it is something, it goes things like, Olaf was here and found much treasure. Well, of course, doubtful if they found a damn thing, but for the chaps with the pointy hats that came after them, they were just wanting to tick them off. We got all the good stuff, sort of thing. So where this ties in to some degree is Orkney. Another thing that a lot of people have heard of are the Sinclairs, the Sinclair family of, what on earth is that? Masonic, yes, the Masonic area close to Edinburgh. The Sinclairs were also known as princes of Orkney. And when you go to Kirkwall Cathedral in Orkney, there's lots of references to them and other Vikings. And there's a lot of Masonic symbolism within Kirkwall Cathedral. This is conjecture on my part, that the burrowing into the inside chamber of Maze Howe somehow, ties in directly to that degree. But that's not part of Royal Arch education. It's just a bit of conjecture and supposition on my part, but it really does mesh together so well that that was a little add-on. So with that, and actually here's another thing that I do need to work up, is the history of this jet. This symbol on here is a triple tau, which has real value, a real significance within Royal Arch Masonry. And it's quite a handsome apron, I would say. So if you ever want to sport one of these, this gentleman here may well have application for him.
Brother Junior Worden, whence come you? From the west, worshipful. Whither we had gone in search of the genuine secrets of a master mason. Have you been successful? We have not. Join the Royal Arch, and it says, during their labors, valuable discoveries are made, culminating in the recovery of the lost master's word. You can ask me to tell you. Nope. Application, please. Royal Arch Law. But that's what this degree is about. The Royal Arch degree is probably the most dramatic degree. That's the third degree of Red Lodge, probably the most dramatic. And after that, there are two other concordant bodies which interweave their way in through it. So that's the last that I had to say.
There you go.